System boot sequence initialized. Welcome to the xRTFMx network master briefing, broadcasting live from the primary network backbone deep inside the bedrock vault. You are interfacing with the centralized xRTFMx data silos, our unified repository tracking global infrastructure vulnerabilities, technical paradigm shifts, forensic system autopsies, and macro-geopolitical anomalies. As the subsurface telemetry lines complete their handshake protocols across the copper tranks, all background processes have been isolated to ensure raw, unfiltered network intelligence delivery. System synchronization across all sectors is now operating at maximum bandwidth, initializing core archive decryption and proceeding with the official weekly multi-part data dump right now. Read the fucking manual.
Wow. So every time I hear that boot sequence, it really sets the tone, doesn't it?
It really does. And welcome to the deep dive. I'm speaking directly to you, the listener, right now because, well, the source material we're interfacing with today is just almost overwhelmingly intense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are looking at something that operates at the absolute bleeding edge of, like, heavy industrial engineering and uncompromising critical infrastructure defense.
Right, because I want you to imagine a single microchip failing on a satellite. But this satellite is 15 billion miles away, out in the absolute freezing void of deep space.
Yeah, the Voyager 1 anomaly.
Exactly. Now imagine that this microscopic, localized glitch out in the void is actually the exact, unignorable warning sign that a nuclear reactor right here on Earth is quietly preparing to melt down.
It's a staggering realization that the exact same lethal vulnerability that paralyzed that spacecraft is currently buried in the dirt right beneath our feet.
It really is. And we have our hands on this recently declassified, highly technical architectural log from a subterranean facility known only as the xRTFMx network.
And per our mandate with this specific intelligence drop, we are not skimming. We are not summarizing.
No, definitely not. We are going to examine this log line by line, mechanism by mechanism. We're going to meticulously unpack all the hardcore engineering terminology.
Right, because to understand how they solved the anomaly, you really have to understand the absolute paranoia of the facility itself.
Yeah, so let's drop straight into the physical environment of this bunker. Listen to how they describe the descent into Sector 2.
Go for it.
It says, the descent into Sector 2 of the facility leaves the grinding, brute force mechanics of the upper levels far above, trading the deafening roar of pneumatic drills and hydraulic lifts for a suffocating, hyper-insulated silence.
Man, that phrase, suffocating, hyper-insulated silence, it really sets the baseline,
Totally.
They are actively moving away from kinetic industry into a space that requires just absolute stillness.
Exactly. And the log goes on to detail exactly how that stillness is achieved. Let me read this next part. The physical environment here is vastly different, housed entirely within a heavily insulated, lead-lined subterranean vault engineered to reach near absolute zero temperatures.
Near absolute zero. That is cold.
Right. And it continues. To protect against the massive, broadband electromagnetic pulses generated by the lightning matrix in Sector 0, the vault is constructed as a perfect Faraday cage.
Okay, we definitely need to pause and define Faraday cage here.
Yeah, please do.
Because this isn't just like a metal box in a basement. A Faraday cage is a continuous enclosure formed by conductive material.
Okay.
So when an external electrical field hits it like a massive electromagnetic pulse from whatever this lightning matrix is, the electrical charges within the cage's conductive material immediately distribute themselves.
Oh, to cancel out the field.
Exactly. They perfectly cancel out the field's effect on the interior. It renders whatever is inside that cage absolutely blind and deaf to the electrical violence happening outside.
That's incredible. And the text gets specific about the materials. It says, the walls, the floor, and the ceiling are meticulously lined with overlapping plates of thick copper and nickel. Yeah, it calls it a nickel-iron soft ferromagnetic alloy chosen for its exceptionally high magnetic permeability. But why the specific combination of copper and mu metal? I mean, copper is standard, but mu metal sounds incredibly exotic.
Well, it is. See, copper is brilliant for conducting electricity and handling radio frequencies, right? But it doesn't stop magnetic fields.
Okay.
That's where mu metal comes in. It's a specialized nickel-iron alloy with exceptionally high magnetic permeability.
What does that actually mean in physics terms, though?
Basically, magnetic permeability is just the measure of a material's ability to support the formation of a magnetic field within itself.
So it absorbs it.
Yeah, basically. Because mu metal's permeability is so high, it provides a path of least resistance for magnetic flux. So instead of a magnetic wave passing through the wall and scrambling the delicate processors inside, The mu metal absorbs the magnetic field lines.
Wow.
It pulls them into itself and routes them harmlessly around the vault. It literally bends the magnetic physics of the room.
That is wild. And the extreme isolation continues with the power supply. Listen to this part. To further guarantee absolute isolation from the violent power fluctuations above, the power supply is completely decoupled from the main mechanical generator.
Oh, they cut the grid connection.
Entirely.
Yeah.
It says they rely instead on a massive subterranean bank of lead-acid submarine batteries that provide perfectly clean, stable, direct current power.
This tells us exactly why deep data processing demands this level of physical isolation from the world.
How so?
Well, if you are operating quantum-level computing matrices, you absolutely cannot rely on a standard mechanical generator.
Because of the moving parts.
Exactly. Standard generators produce alternating current AC power. And no matter how good your generator is, alternating current always has microscopic variations.
Like little stutters?
Yeah, a tiny stutter in the diesel engine, or like a microsecond voltage spike, or even a fraction of a hertz drop in frequency.
And to a quantum computer, that tiny stutter is catastrophic, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's game over. It causes bit flips. It mathematically corrupts millions of calculations instantly.
So that's why they use submarine batteries.
Right. By physically severing the processors from the mechanical grid and running them entirely off submarine lead-acid batteries, they are relying on raw, analog chemical reactions.
Lead plates sitting in sulfuric acid.
Exactly. It provides an unshakable, perfectly flat line of direct current. There are no moving parts to stutter. It is just pure, uninterrupted electrochemical voltage.
Okay, so the power is isolated, the magnetic fields are isolated, but then the log details the physical suspension of the vault. And I mean, this is where it sounds almost like science fiction to me.
Oh yeah, the tectonic dampening.
Yeah, it says the entire vault is suspended in total isolation. Because the bunker houses extremely sensitive mechanical drives and quantum-level processing arrays, it cannot be rigidly anchored to the surrounding bedrock.
Because of earthquakes.
Right, it mentions constant microseismic activity, tectonic shifts, and the reverberating shock waves of surface-level impacts.
So how do they float it?
Get this. Therefore, the entire facility rests on a foundation of 144 massive, custom-engineered hydraulic suspension struts operating on a closed-loop, active dampening system.
They are essentially floating a multi-ton concrete and lead vault to just entirely sever it from the Earth itself.
And the mechanics are staggering. Let me read the exact specifications here. Each strut consists of a 4-foot diameter chromium-plated steel piston resting inside a massive steel cylinder filled with a proprietary non-compressible magnetorheological fluid.
Let me jump in right here to explain magnetorheological fluid, because it is just a breathtaking piece of engineering.
Yeah, please. The text says it contains microscopic iron particles suspended in synthetic oil.
Exactly. So it's an engineered synthetic oil filled with billions of microscopic iron shavings. Under normal conditions, it just sloshes around like heavy syrup. It's entirely fluid.
Okay.
But the moment you apply a magnetic field to it, those iron particles snap to attention. They align perfectly along the magnetic flux lines, and the liquid instantly rigidifies into a near-solid state.
And that ties perfectly into the geophone array they mentioned. The log explains the trigger mechanism like this. An array of geophones embedded directly into the bedrock extends outwards in a star pattern for 2 miles.
Geophones are essentially highly sensitive underground microphones. They listen to the tectonic plates.
Right, so when these remote sensors detect an incoming microseismic wave, they transmit an analog signal down armored copper lines to the central tectonic control terminal.
Faster than the shockwave can travel through the dirt.
Exactly. And then this ancient, dedicated 16-bit processor calculates the amplitude and frequency in milliseconds, firing an electrical current through heavy electromagnetic coils wrapped around each of the 144 hydraulic struts.
And that engages the magnetic field.
Yep. As the magnetic field engages, the iron particles in the fluid instantly align, turning the liquid into a near-solid state in less than 5 milliseconds.
5 milliseconds. Literally faster than the blink of an eye.
It says it dynamically alters the stiffness of the suspension to perfectly counteract the frequency of the seismic wave.
So the processor calculates exactly how hard that shockwave is going to hit the bunker, hardens the suspension struts to the exact density required, and absorbs that specific frequency.
So the Earth violently shakes, but the vault remains perfectly, flawlessly still.
It's incredible, but, the obsession with purity doesn't stop at the floorboards. The air quality protocols are equally extreme.
Oh man, the air scrubbers. Let me pull that up. The ambient room temperature inside the vault is maintained at a strict 40 degrees Fahrenheit, chilling the air to a point where every breath plumes into the dimly lit space and hangs like heavy fog.
Spooky visual.
Right, and it continues. The air entering this subterranean vault is pulled from the surface world through a massive multi-staged industrial intake shaft spanning 200 vertical feet.
Utilizing a staged velocity drop architecture, right?
Yes, exactly. To separate heavy debris, massive impeller fans spin the incoming air into a violent vortex in a cyclonic separation chamber, forcing heavy metallic dust to the outer walls.
We should note that cyclonic separation is a beautifully violent form of kinetic filtration.
How does it compare to a normal filter?
Well, you don't use a fabric mesh that can clog. Instead, you spin the incoming air so incredibly fast that the centrifugal force physically throws the heavier particulate matter outward.
Ah, so it just slams into the walls.
Exactly. The heavy dust slams against the outer walls and falls down a hopper, while the lighter, cleaner air in the center of the vortex passes through to the next stage.
And the next stage is basically a chemical refinery. Let me read this. The remaining air is pushed into a wet filtration system, bubbled through a continuous flow of heavily concentrated sodium hydroxide stored in 5,000-gallon glass-lined steel vats.
Sodium hydroxide, that is highly caustic.
Yeah, the log says this highly caustic bath strips out acidic gases and carbon dioxide before passing the air through rotating desiccant wheels packed with industrial-grade silica gel to absorb all remaining moisture.
They want absolutely dry air.
Dry and pure. Finally, the dry, chemically neutral air passes through high-efficiency particulate air filters rated to trap particles down to 0.01 microns, ensuring that the critical internal environments remain absolutely uncontaminated.
0.01 microns. That is microscopic.
Okay, let me just pause here. I have to admit, reading this, I'm struggling with a massive contradiction.
What's that?
Well, if you are building a highly sensitive, pristine, quantum-level computing array, why is the physical defense so ungodly brutalist?
It really is brutalist.
Right. You've got 4-foot chromium pistons firing in milliseconds. You've got violent cyclonic spinners. You've got 5,000-gallon vats of highly caustic sodium hydroxide bubbling away.
It's intense.
It sounds like someone decided to build a perfectly sterile, high-tech surgical theater inside the engine room of a violently shaking diesel submarine. How do those two extremes coexist?
That submarine analogy hits the nail on the head. But the reason the perimeter defense is so brutalist is precisely because the internal environment is so unfathomably fragile.
Fragile how?
Think about it. A single 0.01 micron speck of metallic dust bypassing that system and landing on a heavily overclocked naked silicon die running a quantum calculation.
It would short it out.
It would cause a microscopic thermal bridge. It would short out a processor that might be calculating the trajectory of a celestial body.
Wow.
The violent mechanics, the kinetic spinners, the caustic chemical baths, the massive electromagnets are the necessary brawn required to protect the incredibly delicate brain from the chaotic noise of the Earth.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of that delicate brain, let's look at how they keep it from melting. Because the cooling system detailed in the log introduces a level of paranoia that is genuinely alarming.
Oh, the liquid nitrogen loops.
Yes. At the absolute center of this freezing, heavily purified isolation sit the primary processing clusters, completely submerged in highly engineered, non-conductive dielectric fluid baths.
Submerging processors entirely in fluid.
The submersion tanks themselves are massive, constructed from 3-inch thick cast acrylic and heavily reinforced with industrial steel framing. Inside these transparent liquid-filled tombs, clusters of ancient, heavily modified 16-bit and 32-bit multiprocessor arrays are hardwired in parallel using pure gold bus bars.
Pure gold bus bars to completely eliminate electrical resistance and systemic latency.
Exactly.
You know, submerging processors in dielectric fluid is a radical cooling method. Unlike standard water, dielectric fluid is engineered to be non-conductive to electricity, but highly conductive to heat.
So it doesn't short them out.
Right. By drowning the entire motherboard in this liquid, they completely eliminate the thermal bottlenecks of air cooling. It allows them to push these ancient 16 and 32-bit chips far beyond their original factory limitations.
Which brings us to the liquid nitrogen loops. The text says the dielectric fluid submersion allows this heavily modified silicon architecture to be brutally overclocked to speeds that would instantly melt standard commercial hardware.
Brutally overclock. I love that phrasing.
Right. The dielectric fluid flows at an astonishing 500 gallons per minute, maintained at a steady minus 40 degrees Celsius by a secondary liquid nitrogen closed-loop cooling system.
Minus 40 degrees.
And it gets crazier. This liquid nitrogen is pumped from high-pressure spherical dewars located in an adjacent sublevel, traveling through miles of double-walled, vacuum-jacketed stainless steel piping straight into the submerged heat exchangers.
That introduces a massive physical threat, though.
Yeah, the log notes, the industrial circulation pumps managing this intense liquid flow draw 45 amps per phase at 480 volts, generating a low, continuous mechanical vibration that resonates subtly through the heavy steel floor grating.
Pumping liquid nitrogen through miles of subterranean piping. Liquid nitrogen is not just cold, it is highly volatile when confined.
And the log explicitly addresses that threat. This is where the daily reality of these operators sounds unbearable to me. Maintaining these volatile cryogenic loops requires relentless, unyielding vigilance, as the margin between functional overclocking and catastrophic structural failure is practically non-existent.
Because of the phase separators.
Exactly. Operators must constantly monitor the pressure relief valves and the critical phase separators. The physical parameters dictate that if a single phase separator fails, the raw liquid nitrogen could inadvertently enter a gas-only return line.
Okay, we really need to drill down into the physics of explosive decompression here.
Please, because I want to understand why they are so terrified of a phase separator failing.
So liquid nitrogen exists at minus 196 degrees Celsius. When it warms up and turns into a gas, its volume expands at a ratio of nearly 1 to 700.
1 to 700.
Yes, and a phase separator is a critical valve designed to let only the boiled-off vapor vent back out of the loop.
So if it breaks.
If that valve fails and dense, raw liquid nitrogen enters a confined, relatively warmer return pipe, it boils instantly. It violently expands nearly 700 times its original volume in a fraction of a second inside a sealed steel tube.
Oh, God.
That pipe doesn't just burst, it becomes a bomb. It would blow the vault apart from the inside.
The resulting rapid expansion event would not merely cause a thermal shutdown. It would be capable of tearing the heavy stainless steel plumbing violently off the walls, vaporizing the cryogenic lines, and causing a catastrophic, lethal overpressure event within the bunker.
It's terrifying.
And the tension doesn't even end there. They also have to worry about the insulation on the pipes.
Right, the vacuum seal.
This constant looming threat of explosive decompression demands absolute precision,
Yeah.
creating an atmosphere of palpable tension where every microscopic shift in fluid dynamics could signal imminent obliteration.
Palpable tension is an understatement.
The vacuum level within the jacketed piping must remain below 10 microns, because any loss of insulation would lead to immediate line freezing and thermal throttling, capable of warping the submerged processors beyond physical repair.
See, the double-walled piping has a vacuum between the layers, much like a high-end thermos.
Okay.
If that vacuum seal breaks and air gets in even a tiny leak, the extreme cold transfers to the outer pipe. The pipe freezes solid with atmospheric moisture, which chokes the flow of the coolant.
And then the processors overheat.
Extremely fast. The dielectric fluid rapidly heats up, and those naked, heavily overclocked processors, running without their minus 40-degree bath, would violently overheat in seconds. The silicon would literally warp and blister beyond repair.
So let's recap. We have a multi-ton floating vault, caustic acid baths, and liquid nitrogen bombs waiting to go off. All of this is built to absolutely isolate the facility from the chaotic noise of Earth.
Right.
But what exactly is it listening so desperately to hear? This brings us to the reception and data storage array.
Oh, the magnetic tape library.
Yeah, and this is another area where the technology feels completely contradictory to modern expectations. Looming over the submerged processors along the entire rear wall of the vault is the towering 40-foot-high automated magnetic tape library system.
40 feet high.
Sector 2 does not rely on fragile solid-state drives or spinning magnetic platters for its deep historical archives, because the sheer volume of telemetry data generated requires a medium inherently immune to electromagnetic pulses, raw radiation, and bit rot over decades of cold storage.
It's fascinating that in a facility utilizing quantum processing, they rely on ancient magnetic tape for their core memory.
Why do they?
Well, from an engineering standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Magnetic tape is a physical, robust medium. It doesn't rely on delicate microscopic silicon gates that can be permanently flipped by stray cosmic rays or voltage spikes.
Oh, right. And the way they retrieve that tape is incredibly aggressive. Let me read this. The rear wall is a massive array of hexagonal honeycomb storage slots, containing hundreds of thousands of individual magnetic tape cartridges, utilizing highly customized linear tape open architecture modified for extreme data density.
And then the automaton comes in.
Yeah, running silently along a heavy-duty dual-rail track system across the face of this honeycomb structure is the Automated Retrieval Automaton.
What a name.
Powered by heavy-duty servo motors and pneumatics, this high-speed, multi-axis robotic arm system waits in the shadows. When commanded, it will violently accelerate along the track at 15 meters per second to snatch a designated cartridge and slam it into one of the 128 available heavy-duty tape drive readers.
15 meters per second is roughly 33 miles per hour.
Inside a room.
Exactly. Picture a massive, heavy, industrial robotic claw flying across a 40-foot wall at 33 miles per hour in near absolute darkness. It violently snatches a tape and slams it into a reader. The sheer kinetic energy involved in just retrieving a file is staggering.
The drives will then spin up the spools with physical audible aggression, reading the magnetic flux at unprecedented speeds to cross-reference historical telemetry against new anomalies.
So that is how they store the data. Now let's look at how they receive it.
Right, the antenna. The log outlines Sector 4's antenna, and again, it sounds completely bizarre. The bunker maintains its connection to the surface world and the deep void beyond through Sector 4's very low-frequency subterranean antenna array.
Very low frequency.
Yeah, it explains why. Standard high-frequency radio waves cannot penetrate the 200 feet of dense bedrock, Class 4 concrete, and lead shielding that encase the facility.
So they use VLF.
Instead, the very low-frequency array utilizes miles of heavy-gauge, unshielded copper cables physically plowed into the bedrock layer, spreading out from the bunker in a massive, multi-directional web.
Very low frequency, or VLF, is entirely different from the radio waves we use every day.
Like FM radio.
Right. Your cell phone or FM radio uses relatively short, high-frequency waves. They bounce off buildings, and they get absorbed by dirt and rock within a few feet.
But the log provides the exact metrics on this VLF stuff. Operating at frequencies between 3 kilohertz and 30 kilohertz, the wavelengths are extremely long, spanning 10 to 100 kilometers, allowing the radio waves to literally travel through the Earth's crust and the deep ocean without significant attenuation.
They physically pass through the dirt.
Crazy. Inside the bunker, the reception hardware relies on massive inductor coils wound around solid ferrite cores, some weighing in excess of 4,000 pounds.
4,000 pounds.
These monolithic coils detect microscopic electromagnetic fluctuations in the bedrock and step the voltage up through a series of vacuum tube amplifiers.
Oh.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to stop right here because I am genuinely struggling to wrap my head around this part.
Yeah, the vacuum tubes throw a lot of people off.
They are trying to intercept faint, highly complex signals from deep space, right? And to do this, they are using giant 4,000-pound magnets and ancient glass vacuum tubes buried in the dirt.
Yep.
Why not just use a network of modern high-tech orbital satellites with digital relays? Using vacuum tubes sounds completely archaic. It sounds like World War II technology.
Well, it is World War II technology, and it is entirely archaic by design. The log explicitly answers this. It all comes back to electromagnetic pulse immunity.
Oh, the EMPs again.
Right. Modern silicon transistors, the microscopic, highly efficient switches inside modern satellites, cell phones, and digital radios are incredibly vulnerable to voltage spikes.
So if there's an EMP...
If Sector 0 generates a massive electromagnetic pulse, which the log heavily implies it does with its lightning matrix, every single piece of solid-state electronics in the vicinity would fry instantly.
But a vacuum tube survives.
Exactly. A vacuum tube isn't a microscopic silicon bridge. It is literally a physical glass bulb with metal elements spaced apart inside a vacuum. It uses raw heat and wide physical space to control the flow of electrons.
Nice.
Because of its sheer physical size and reliance on heat rather than microscopic voltage gates, a vacuum tube is inherently physically immune to EMPs.
So it's basically indestructible from an electrical standpoint.
Exactly. By using 4,000-pound inductors and glass tubes, the engineers guarantee that no matter how violent the power surges become, the bunker never goes deaf.
And because VLF travels through the crust, it's safe underground.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be exposed on the surface where a kinetic strike or a weather event could destroy it. It is about unbreakable, uncompromising analog resilience.
Unbreakable analog resilience. I love that phrasing. So we have the physical antenna, but who is actually translating this data? Let's talk about the operators.
Orion.
Yes, commanding this staggering array of ancient mechanics and quantum processing is a cybernetic entity internally designated as Orion, the macro telemetry commander, and deep space protocol director.
Cybernetic entity.
Clad in dark green and dark blue fur, with bright red eyes that pierce the dim lighting and intricate multicolored circuitry woven seamlessly into his biological frame, Orion anchors all anomaly logging arrays.
The integration between biological tissue and the brutal architecture of the bunker is just incredibly visceral in this document.
Visceral is the exact word for it. Listen to how Orion interfaces with the mainframe. Operating this terminal requires a fundamentally different integration than the brute force mechanical armatures used in the other sectors. The deep neural sync required to process millions of lines of hexadecimal code in real-time places extreme, dangerous strain on his biological brainstem.
His brain?
Right. The initialization of the cortical-spinal interface is a visceral, physically demanding sequence that bridges the gap between biological tissue and cold iron architecture. Unlike the manual patch cables wielded by the peripheral crews, Orion utilizes a direct, hardwired cortical connection.
He plugs in directly.
A heavy, shielded fiber optic umbilical slowly drops from the lead-lined ceiling above his command chair. With a heavy mechanical click, the connector locks directly into the specialized cervical port, permanently fused into the base of Orion's skull.
He is physically plugging his central nervous system into the vault. It bypasses the ocular nerves entirely.
Yes, the text states exactly that. This brutal piece of hardware bypasses the ocular nerves entirely, designed to feed raw, unfiltered hexadecimal data directly into the visual cortex.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
As the connection seats, the neon blue monitors flicker in sync with his pulse. Artificial neural pathways known as synaptic relay buffers power up to act as biological fuses.
We need to pause on that term, biological fuses.
Yeah, that sounds ominous.
Let the weight of that sink in. Just like a fuse in your breaker box blows to save your house from an electrical fire, Orion has artificial pathways inside his skull designed to physically burn out and sever his connection if the data flow becomes too intense.
Wow. These buffers are meticulously engineered to deliberately blow out and sever the connection in the event of a sudden data surge, protecting the fragile organic brain tissue from being permanently scorched by the immense flow of incoming telemetry.
He's literally sacrificing his internal hardware to save his organic brainstem.
And the system monitors him constantly, too. With the umbilical firmly locked, the system begins strictly monitoring Orion's biological vitals. Heart rate, blood pressure, and cortical fluid temperatures are actively tracked, as they can spike to dangerous, critical levels when the neural load increases during a deep data trace.
Cortical fluid temperatures. His brain is literally heating up.
The hardware failsafe hums with potential energy, constantly scanning for disorganized theta wave cascades in his brain activity. If he loses control, the failsafe will automatically fire, physically ejecting the fiber optic plug to prevent permanent neurological burnout.
So the staging is totally set. The vault is sealed, the dielectric fluids are pumping, the vacuum tubes are glowing, and Orion is physically locked into the mainframe, risking his own biological integrity.
Right. Now, what exactly comes through that connection?
The whisper from the void.
Far beyond the oppressive, lead-lined walls of the subterranean bunker, far beyond the toxic atmospheric particulate filters of Sector 3, an agonizingly faint whisper bleeds through the cosmos.
It's almost poetic.
It originates from an incomprehensible distance, over 15 billion miles away, plunging through the freezing, irradiated emptiness of interstellar space. This is the dying heartbeat of humanity's most distant artificial creation, the Voyager 1 spacecraft.
Voyager 1, launched in the late 1970s, truly a relic of early aerospace engineering.
Launched in the late 1970s, this ancient mechanical explorer has spent nearly 50 years faithfully acting as a deep space narrator, transmitting a rich, continuous tapestry of complex science and engineering telemetry back to the terrestrial world.
But space is brutal.
But the vast, silent void is unforgiving, and the relentless bombardment of cosmic radiation eventually breaks all things.
The log notes the speed of the interception, too. How fast is this dying heartbeat actually coming in?
It is agonizingly slow. The intercepted signal bleeds into the primary data bus at an excruciatingly slow velocity of exactly 300 bits per second.
300 bits per second.
This is not a massive multi-terabyte hexadecimal dump extracted from a terrestrial corporate server. It is a slow, agonizing drip of raw, uncompressed binary code drifting across the solar system like debris on an ocean current.
Just for context for you, the listener, on how slow that actually is. 300 bits per second is roughly 37 text characters per second.
That's nothing.
Think of someone slowly typing a sentence on a keyboard. That is the entire data bandwidth of this multi-billion-dollar mission, is a microscopic trickle of information.
And when that trickle hits Orion's brainstem, he instantly knows it's broken. Down in the near absolute zero cryogenic vault of Sector 2, Orion feels the initial pulse of the incoming telemetry through his direct cortical spinal interface.
He feels it.
But as the data begins to pool into the massive multiprocessor arrays submerged in the -40-degree dielectric fluid beneath him, it becomes immediately, terrifyingly apparent that something is profoundly wrong.
The anomaly.
The telemetry feed, which should be a complex, tightly woven matrix of flight dynamics, plasma wave measurements, and magnetometer readings, has abruptly shifted into a macroscopic anomaly.
So what is the exact nature of the anomaly? What is the spacecraft actually saying to him?
In late 2023, slowly bleeding into early 2024, the continuous transmission of Voyager 1 suffered a critical causality loop.
A causality loop.
The spacecraft's flight data system, the central nervous system responsible for packaging and formatting the delicate science telemetry, completely collapsed. Instead of rendering readable packets of engineering logic, the deep space radio transmitter locked into a repetitive, undecodable binary loop.
And Orion is plugged directly into this.
Orion's internal cortical feed is suddenly flooded with an endless, maddening sequence of alternating ones and zeros. It is a perfect, uninterrupted digital flatline.
A flatline.
A permanent, unbroken square wave of absolute nothingness broadcasting from the darkest edge of the interstellar abyss.
A permanent, unbroken square wave. Let's really break down what that actually means on an oscilloscope.
Okay.
In a healthy computing system, data looks beautifully chaotic. It's a dense, unpredictable sine wave of complex information moving up and down wildly.
Right.
But an alternating sequence of ones and zeros, 1 0, 1 0, 1 0, is just an electrical pulse turning on and off in perfect, rigid, mechanical rhythm.
Like a metronome.
Exactly. It contains zero complex information. It means the software has entirely stopped thinking, stopped calculating, and is just screaming a static electrical tone into the dark.
So to figure out why the machine is screaming, Orion brings in a specialist.
Daisy.
Recognizing the sheer complexity of this ancient hardware failure, Orion immediately routes the 300 bits per second stream away from the central bus, throwing the raw binary arrays straight to the terminal of the cybernetic entity internally designated as Daisy.
What's her role?
Positioned at her heavily shielded console, Daisy serves as the pattern recognition lead and threat vector cryptanalyst. Her biological frame is heavily augmented, defined by dark purple fur, bright pink ocular sensors, and intricate glowing purple circuitry seamlessly woven through her mechanical chassis.
Now, Daisy's approach to the data is highly specialized. She doesn't just use standard debugging tools, right?
No, the log makes that distinction really clear. Daisy is intuitive, highly perceptive, and specifically engineered to capture hidden algorithmic anomalies that standard brute force logic gates would blindly step over.
She looks deeper.
She does not look at the incoming data as simple code. She feels the structural geometry of the failure. As the alternating ones and zeros cascade down her neon green displays, her pink eyes track the microscopic timing of the signal.
And she figures it out immediately.
She instantly recognizes that this is not an encrypted corporate lockdown, nor is it a hostile external cybernetic intrusion. It is a fatal internal logic collapse born from 1970s assembly code crying out in the dark.
Okay, to understand why this 1970s assembly code collapsed so violently, we really need to look at two fundamental concepts the engineers outlined in their glossary.
I have the glossary section right here. Let's do it.
The first concept is what they call a volatile memory array.
Term 1. Volatile memory array.
Yeah.
This represents the physical, rigid grid of discrete silicon logic chips soldered directly onto the master motherboard.
Okay.
Unlike cold storage magnetic tape or modern solid-state drives, volatile memory requires a continuous, uninterrupted flow of electrical voltage to maintain its delicate binary state.
This is a crucial distinction. Modern computers use non-volatile memory for long-term storage, like the solid-state drive in your laptop. It remembers your photos and documents even when the battery dies.
But volatile memory forgets.
Volatile memory, like RAM, forgets everything the millisecond it loses power. On ancient spacecraft, they relied entirely on volatile memory arrays composed of discrete, physical silicon chips.
And space is full of radiation.
Exactly. If the raw power drops, or if the microscopic silicon traces within a specific chip degrade, burn out, and physically fracture due to decades of relentless deep space radiation exposure.
That specific physical address becomes permanently unable to hold or return data, instantly creating a lethal microscopic blind spot in the central processor's vision.
When a high-energy cosmic ray blasts through one of those chips out in the void, it physically burns out a microscopic copper trace. That piece of memory doesn't just experience a software glitch, it dies permanently.
The physical hardware is shattered.
The silicon is physically fractured. It leaves a permanent crater on the motherboard.
And that crater triggers the second glossary term, which is the core nightmare of the anomaly.
The infinite execution snare.
Term 2. Infinite execution snare. This is the catastrophic, terrifying software paradox triggered when a highly optimized ancient formatting kernel blindly encounters a dead memory sector.
Because the assembly code isn't modern.
Right, because legacy aerospace assembly code utterly lacks massive, modern error-handling subroutines. A null return from a dead silicon chip automatically causes a fatal exception that instantly, violently resets the program counter back to the absolute beginning of the routine.
Let me explain this with an analogy. Think about the smartphone in your pocket.
Right.
If an app tries to read a corrupted file or a dead piece of memory, the operating system catches the crash. It generates a little error report, closes the app, quarantines the bad memory, and you just go back to your home screen.
It handles the error safely.
But 1970s aerospace assembly code had to be infinitesimally small to fit on the spacecraft. There was absolutely no room for gigabytes of error handling.
What happens?
The software hits the dead silicon crater, panics, and its only built-in defense mechanism is to restart the task from step 1.
Oh no, the processor rapidly hurtles down the exact same execution path, strikes the exact same dead chip, crashes and resets again, permanently trapping the entire operating system in a microscopic, inescapable circle of logic that completely paralyzes all primary machine functions.
Because step 1 always leads exactly back to the dead chip, the machine enters an infinite loop, crashing and restarting thousands of times a second.
Wow.
That is the infinite execution snare. That is why Voyager was broadcasting an alternating square wave. It was just the processor violently turning itself off and on again forever.
So they know what the problem is. The silicon is burned, and the code is trapped in a snare. But knowing the problem isn't the same as proving exactly where it is. To fix this, the bunker has to perform an autopsy. The initial pattern recognition achieved within the freezing, heavily insulated confines of Sector 2 provides the mathematical proof of the anomaly. But the quantum matrices and deep space telemetry arrays cannot physically touch the shattered logic of the dying spacecraft.
They need to touch the hardware.
To dissect the true nature of the failure, the digital ghost trace must be violently pulled down from the ethereal network streams and forced into a brutal physical manifestation.
They have to move out of Sector 2.
The autopsy must transition into Sector 1, the subdivision internally designated as the Black Box Forensic Theater.
The Black Box Forensic Theater. And the environment of Sector 1 is radically different from the clean, freezing silence of Sector 2.
The physical footprint of this sector spans a massive subterranean vault, mirroring the staggering scale of an 80,000 square foot heavy industrial facility.
So it's basically a factory.
The flooring beneath the operators is composed entirely of modular, static dissipative, heavy-duty steel grating suspended over a massive subfloor cable routing matrix, allowing for the total flexibility required when wheeling in multi-ton wreckage or massive mainframe server chassis.
What's in the middle of all this?
At the absolute center of this sprawling, dimly lit industrial vault sits the primary diagnostic slab. This is not a standard engineering workbench. It is a 12-ton, flawlessly machined titanium surface, equipped with heavily reinforced integrated hydraulic lifts and multi-axis robotic armatures capable of generating immense physical torque.
A 12-ton titanium operating table. They aren't diagnosing software here. They are tearing apart iron and silicon.
And the operators in Sector 1 reflect that brute force entirely. Standing at the edge of the 12-ton titanium slab are the two entities tasked with tearing the ancient 1970s code apart by its physical roots.
Torch and Spark.
Torch, the industrial control systems specialist in kinetics muscle, anchors the heavy mechanical teardown. His massive cybernetic frame is defined by dense, dark red fur and bright, glowing red ocular sensors.
Kinetics muscle.
Torch's upper limbs are constructed entirely from machined heavy industrial aluminum and sealed oil bath planetary gear sets, optimized not for fine typing but for brute force manual dial rotation, high-speed toggle switching, and the physical manipulation of heavy industrial hardware.
So Torch is the pure kinetic force, the muscle required to just bend metal and wrestle chassis onto the slab.
But he is balanced by his partner. Standing opposite him across the slab is Spark, the core infrastructure systems pilot and live intake automation architect.
What's Spark's deal?
Spark's chassis radiates with high-velocity kinetic energy, marked by dark orange fur, intensely bright orange visual optics, and glowing orange circuitry. Spark is a fast-talking, high-velocity automation engineer, equipped with specialized serial bus analyzers and high-speed hardware patching armatures designed to trace electrical continuity at the microsecond level.
So we have Torch for the heavy lifting and Spark for the microsecond electrical continuity. But how do they actually perform an autopsy on a machine that is literally out of reach?
They build a physical ghost of it. Listen to this process. Because Voyager 1 is currently drifting through the freezing void of interstellar space, Torch and Spark cannot simply drag the physical chassis of the crippled spacecraft onto the diagnostic slab.
Obviously.
Instead, they must execute a flawless one-to-one physical hardware reconstruction of the 1970s flight data system right there on the titanium surface.
They fabricate a macroscopic clone.
Utilizing ancient salvaged components recovered from the deepest cold storage silos of the bunker, Torch begins the grueling process of physical reconstruction. He drops massive, thick fiberglass motherboards onto the slab, utilizing his integrated micro-soldering elements and high-temperature arc welders to fuse pure gold bus bars to the printed circuit boards.
The level of detail here is obsessive.
He meticulously recreates the exact wire wrapping techniques utilized by aerospace engineers over 50 years ago, running thousands of microscopic copper filaments between the individual legs of the complementary metal oxide semiconductor logic chips.
Every single connection.
Every single electrical pathway, every resistor, and every physical memory block must perfectly mirror the architecture of the spacecraft, currently screaming in the dark.
And once Torch builds the skeleton, Spark has to pump the ghost trace into it.
While Torch constructs the physical skeleton of the machine, Spark interfaces directly with Intermediate Distribution Frame 2, a massive 24-port copper patch block dedicated strictly to forensic mechanical capture.
He routes the signal.
Spark throws heavy mechanical toggle switches, routing the uncompressed continuous binary loop of alternating ones and zeros streaming from Sector 4 straight into the physical clone on the titanium slab.
The clone comes alive with the broken code.
As the simulated power sequence is initiated, Spark monitors a massive analog cathode ray tube oscilloscope connected directly to the primary data bus. The neon green sine waves flatline immediately, snapping into rigid, violent square waves that perfectly match the infinite loop of alternating ones and zeros. Wait, I need to stop you right there.
Yeah.
I want to actively challenge this entire methodology because honestly, reading this, it doesn't make sense to me.
What part?
You've got these incredible engineers. They spend days perfectly recreating a dead computer on a 12-ton titanium slab down to the exact wire wrapping.
Right.
They route the signal, they watch it flatline on an oscilloscope, they've proven the silicon is burned out,
Yeah.
but the real machine is currently traveling through the freezing void 15 billion miles away.
Yeah, you can't just FedEx a new memory chip out to the Oort cloud to fix it.
Exactly. So how is building a physical hardware-level clone on Earth actually useful? Why not just run a software simulation on a modern computer? It seems like a massive waste of resources and time.
It's a highly logical critique, and honestly, it sounds crazy at first, but the text specifically justifies this extreme methodology by explaining the fundamental nature of assembly language.
Okay, how so?
Assembly code is the lowest level of programming. It interacts directly with the physical microscopic architecture of the microchip. In modern software development, if you run a simulation of a phone or a server on your computer, the software abstracts the hardware. It essentially fakes the electrical pathways.
Right.
But in this autopsy, the failure isn't in the logic itself. The code is doing exactly what it was programmed to do. The failure is the physical geometry of the copper traces and silicon gates degrading under cosmic radiation.
So the simulation has to account for physical resistance.
Exactly. To understand exactly how the assembly code pointer is mathematically reacting to the dead physical space, you must perfectly mirror the physical resistance, the capacitance, and the microsecond voltage drops of the original 1970s hardware.
So a software simulation wouldn't catch it.
A software simulation might smooth over a microsecond timing error that a physical capacitor would catch. The physical autopsy proves beyond a shadow of a doubt exactly which physical address is dead, ensuring that when they write the bypass, they are aiming at the precise microscopic target.
That makes total sense. And to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, Torch literally murders the clone on the slab.
Oh yeah, the overvolting.
Torch uses his heavy industrial armatures to apply high-voltage diagnostic probes directly to the matching memory chip on their physical clone, intentionally overvolting the specific silicon pathway to perfectly simulate the hardware burnout occurring 15 billion miles away.
He fries it manually.
The moment the chip dies on the titanium slab, Spark watches the software kernel immediately collapse on his serial bus analyzers. The core mechanics of the causality loop instantly become clear.
The physical autopsy is complete. They have identified the digital corpse. They know exactly which microscopic silicon gate is shattered.
But identifying the failure does not fix it.
No, now they must rewrite the fundamental laws of the machine from across the solar system.
And the physics of the solar system make that nearly impossible. The log shifts to the sheer logistical nightmare of the communication delay. The true existential terror of this deep space anomaly does not lie simply in the localized hardware failure itself, but in the staggering, almost incomprehensible logistical nightmare required to implement a remote software bypass across the solar system.
The transmission times are just punishing.
Radio waves traveling outward at the absolute maximum speed of light require exactly 22.5 hours to cross the dark expanse just to reach the spacecraft's ancient high-gain parabolic antenna.
The speed of light is roughly 186,000 miles per second. That is the fundamental speed limit of the universe.
And it still takes 22 hours.
And even at that speed, it takes nearly a full Earth day just to touch the antenna of the craft.
If an engineer on Earth commands the distant machine to execute a single microscopic line of code, they cannot simply watch the results in real time. They must transmit the command and then sit in suffocating, paralyzing silence for 22.5 hours while the radio frequency bursts outward into the black.
And that's just one way.
Then they must wait another excruciating 22.5 hours for the spacecraft's automated confirmation response to travel all the way back to the terrestrial tracking stations.
45 hours total.
This brutal reality of astrophysics creates a terrifying, agonizing 45-hour round-trip communication window where absolutely nothing can be done but wait in the dark, wondering if a single mistyped character just permanently destroyed humanity's most distant creation.
A 45-hour waiting room where every single second is agonizing? To execute this, the bunker brings in the heavy hitters.
Down in the heavily insulated, lead-lined cryogenic vault of Sector 2, the cybernetic entity internally designated as Zero steps up to the primary command console.
Zero.
Zero is the root-level logic architect. He is the master hardware inspector, the final failsafe.
But he needs help.
To execute this highly experimental, incredibly dangerous rescue operation, Zero requires a high-fidelity field specialist capable of intuitively auditing 50-year-old assembly code by sheer sight. He summons Prairie Rose, the lead intelligence analyst and forensic auditor.
Zero and Prairie Rose look at the scope of the problem, and they realize they have a massive secondary issue on their hands. They know the code is trapped in a snare, but fixing it isn't as simple as just uploading a patch.
No, because they have no space to put the patch.
Yep.
Listen to the log. Prairie Rose understands inherently that they cannot physically fly out to the absolute edge of the sun's gravitational reach and solder a fresh functional memory chip onto the aging motherboard. The only possible way to save the flight data system and break the infinite execution snare is to execute a flawlessly choreographed remote logic bypass from Earth. But the memory is totally exhausted. The formatting kernel, the specific block of assembly code responsible for beautifully packaging the delicate science telemetry, is incredibly dense. It was engineered and compiled as a single, contiguous, unbroken block of logic.
And that's the problem. It needs to be unbroken.
Because the spacecraft has been operating continuously for nearly 5 decades without a single physical hardware upgrade, its remaining volatile memory banks are heavily fragmented, widely scattered, and utterly exhausted by cosmic radiation bit flips.
So the memory is basically Swiss cheese.
There's absolutely no single empty block of functional memory anywhere on the ancient motherboard large enough to hold the entire, undivided formatting kernel.
There is no contiguous space left. The remaining functional memory isn't a clean slate. It is a patchwork of tiny, surviving pockets scattered randomly across a dying, irradiated motherboard.
So they have to shatter the code. Zero and Prairie Rose look at the green and blue monitors and realize they must perform microscopic digital surgery on the fly. They must mathematically slice the ancient formatting code into tiny, distinct, disjointed software fragments. Let me use an analogy here because the visualization of this is staggering to me.
Sure.
Imagine you have an incredibly complex 100-page instruction manual, but you drop it into a puddle and the middle 20 pages just dissolve.
Okay.
You don't have a blank book to rewrite it in. You only have hundreds of tiny, random scraps of paper scattered across a massive, pitch-black room. So you have to write one sentence on a scrap of paper in the corner, another sentence on a scrap across the room.
Wow, yeah.
And then you have to give a blindfolded person exact, flawless directions on how to find those scraps in the right sequence without ever tripping over the ruined sections. And you are shouting these directions from a different planet, waiting 2 days to see if they trip.
That analogy perfectly captures the sheer terror of this operation. And the mechanism they use to guide that blindfolded processor from scrap to scrap is what the text calls an assembly code pointer.
Let's look at how the log defines these two procedures in the glossary.
Okay, term 3.
Term 3, remote logic bypass. This is the highly experimental, brutally complex, and wildly dangerous process of mathematically severing a corrupted physical hardware sector from an operating system without ever having physical access to the machine itself.
So they are bypassing the crater.
It requires manually writing pure, unadulterated machine code to completely trick the surviving software kernel into abandoning the dead silicon. This forces the central processor to permanently route all data requests to completely different, scattered, surviving sectors of the remaining functional memory banks, effectively building a digital bridge over a physical crater.
So they are building a bridge over the dead memory, but how do they navigate that bridge once it's fragmented?
Term 4, assembly code pointer. This is the foundational, critical navigational beacon of early computing architecture. A pointer is a hard-coded, explicitly defined hexadecimal memory address that dictates the exact physical location the central processor must jump to in order to find its very next sequence of operational instructions.
Right.
When a contiguous, massive software block is deliberately shattered into microscopic fragments to fit into highly degraded memory arrays, every single one of these pointers must be meticulously rewritten by hand to ensure the processor can successfully leap across the motherboard and execute the fragmented code perfectly in sequence without jumping blindly into the dark.
The stakes associated with rewriting an assembly code pointer are absolute. These hexadecimal addresses are essentially coordinate maps for the processor.
So there's a typo.
If 0 is off by a single alphanumeric digit, if he writes an A instead of a B, the processor jumps into dead space. The system fatally crashes, the attitude control thrusters might fire randomly, the main parabolic antenna spins away from Earth, and the spacecraft is permanently, irreversibly lost to the void.
They practice this fragmented bridge on the titanium clone first, right?
Yeah.
Works on the clone. And then they broadcast it for real. 0 manually transfers the hyper-compressed software payload from the cryogenic vault of Sector 2 straight into Sector 4, the comms and intercept array.
Here goes nothing.
He blasts the uncompressed binary shards, the newly updated assembly pointers, and the complete remote logic bypass directly into the hijacked orbital relay.
They bounced it off a Cold War satellite.
The satellite acts as a blind automated mirror, instantly bouncing the high-energy radio frequency burst outward, pushing it beyond the moon, beyond the asteroid belt, and directly into the interstellar abyss. The command is officially gone, and then the subterranean facility goes completely, horrifyingly dark.
The 45-hour silence begins, and the text describes the psychological weight of this wait in incredibly heavy terms.
For 22.5 excruciating hours, the microscopic payload of ones and zeros travels at the absolute speed of light through the freezing vacuum of space. For 22.5 hours, the cybernetic bear crew waits in total, suffocating silence.
The tension must have been unbearable.
Sector 2 feels like a pressurized, lead-lined tomb. Orion remains anchored in his heavily reclined command chair, his direct cortical spinal interface firmly locked into the base of his skull.
He stays plugged in the whole time.
Orion's bright red ocular sensors stare unblinking into the neon blue phosphorus displays, monitoring the absolute unyielding flatline of the incoming communication signal. He is completely physically paralyzed by the fundamental speed limit of the universe.
You know, the brutal mechanical endurance required to just sit there and wait is mind-bending. Think about the energy being expended around them.
The bunker is still running at maximum capacity.
Exactly. The 144 tectonic dampers are constantly absorbing microseismic shocks. The cyclonic scrubbers are violently spinning toxic air. The industrial pumps are pushing 500 gallons of dielectric fluid a minute, fighting the explosive threat of liquid nitrogen.
Just to keep the computers running.
The entire bunker is screaming with potential energy, all just to keep the vault alive while they sit in absolute silence and listen for a microscopic whisper from the dark.
But the whisper finally returns. Finally, as the 45th hour agonizingly expires, the microscopic electromagnetic fluctuations deep within the continental bedrock surrounding the bunker begin to violently, unmistakably shift.
The VLF array hears it.
The ancient vacuum tube amplifiers begin to glow with sudden, intense, blistering heat as they rapidly step up the microscopic voltage.
Oh, this is the best part.
The signal violently strikes Orion's visual cortex through the heavy fiber optic umbilical cord. The endless, maddening binary loop of alternating ones and zeros, the agonizing digital flat line that has haunted the subterranean facility for months, instantly shatters into a million pieces.
The square waves collapse.
The raw, rigid square waves on the analog cathode ray tube oscilloscopes violently collapse. In their place, a beautiful, chaotic, deeply complex cascade of perfectly formatted, uncompressed hexadecimal sine waves absolutely floods the neon blue displays.
The sine waves return.
The entire cryogenic vault illuminates with the brilliant, pulsing, rhythmic light of restored data. The flight data system has successfully ingested the remote logic bypass.
The pointers held, the logic successfully jumped the crater, the fragmented code executed flawlessly, the machine woke up.
It is an unparalleled triumph of engineering. But, and this is where the log takes a sudden, incredibly dark turn, this triumph immediately metastasizes into a global terrestrial panic.
Yeah, the time jump.
The log jumps forward in time. The passage of time is the ultimate unforgiving variable in the brutal calculus of heavy engineering. Fast forward 8 agonizing years into the future, landing firmly in the bleak, hyper-vigilant technological landscape of 2032.
8 years later,
the realization that humanity's greatest, most historically significant creation was completely brought to its knees, trapped in an infinite execution snare by a localized hardware burnout, permanently rewrote the foundational doctrines of deep space engineering, structural safety models, and the architecture of critical terrestrial infrastructure.
The aerospace implications were immediate, right? The text notes that future deep space probes were programmed with internal automated ghost trace capabilities.
So they could fix themselves.
Exactly. They essentially hard-coded Zero's remote logic bypassed directly into the survival instincts of new machines, so they could quarantine their own dead silicon and rewrite their own pointers autonomously.
But the real nightmare was right here on Earth. I'm reading directly from the log here. The Voyager anomaly triggered a massive, silent, and incredibly desperate panic across the terrestrial globe.
The terrestrial panic.
The horrifying realization dawned on corporate executives, infrastructure architects, and energy grid operators that the exact same complementary metal oxide semiconductor logic chips, the exact same primitive 16-bit assembly language, and the exact same vulnerable, volatile memory architectures that failed in deep space were currently running the most critical, highly sensitive infrastructure on Earth.
This is the existential core of the document, isn't it? We think of our modern world as running on cutting-edge silicon, but the fundamental backbone is ancient.
Right. The legacy hardware of the 1970s and 1980s had never been fully replaced. It had merely been buried beneath modern, glassy, graphical user interfaces.
Just hidden away.
Deep-sea fiber optic repeaters sitting under thousands of pounds of crushing oceanic pressure on the absolute bottom of the Pacific Ocean were running on ancient microcontrollers.
That's bad.
Massive, heavy-duty industrial power grid substations distributing raw high voltage across entire continents relied on legacy processing kernels.
Even worse.
Most terrifying of all, the automated control rods and primary hydraulic cooling loops of aging nuclear reactor facilities were actively monitored by primitive logic gates, highly susceptible to volatile memory burnout.
Nuclear facilities. We have to unpack the mechanics of this nuclear threat.
It says, if a single memory chip in a nuclear cooling controller degraded and through a permanent memory address error, the resulting infinite execution snare would not just silence a radio transmitter in the void, it would trigger a catastrophic, irrecoverable kinetic disaster on the surface of the Earth.
Because the loop restarts.
Resulting in a localized thermal meltdown before the human operators could even recognize the logic lockup.
Think about what happens if a cooling loop controller throws an infinite execution snare. It means the 1970s microchip restarts its internal task loop thousands of times a second.
So it's stuck.
It is completely deaf and blind to the actual sensors reading the reactor core temperature. The coolant pumps stop receiving instructions, so they shut down.
And the core goes critical.
Yes. And up in the control room, the human operators are looking at a frozen graphical interface. The screen says everything is fine because the underlying logic gate is paralyzed in a snare. They are entirely blind to the localized thermal meltdown until the concrete roof physically blows off the building.
And the operators in the bunker realize that waiting for a reactor to throw an error is simply not an option. So they decide to aggressively intervene.
Sector 4 pivots from space to Earth.
Operating in permanent radio silence, Sector 4 utilized its covert physical splicing nodes clamped directly onto the major transoceanic submarine fiber optic trunk lines.
They tap the internet backbone.
The automated deep submergence robotic crawlers had long ago stripped the outer Kevlar armor and polyethylene shielding from the cables, bending the bare glass to a precise mathematical angle to force a microscopic fraction of the light signal to leak out.
They are physically bending bare glass at the bottom of the ocean.
Highly sensitive avalanche photodiodes captured these leaked photons, converted them back into electrical signals, and pushed the unencrypted global backbone feed directly into the bunker.
But capturing leaked photons is entirely passive. What they do next is an active, aggressive cyber assault.
Oh yeah, it gets wild. Donut collaborated directly with Zero, the root-level logic architect, to execute aggressive, terrifyingly precise border gateway protocol route poisoning.
BGP route poisoning.
They hijacked the foundational routing tables of the global internet, masquerading the subterranean bunker as a massive, high-speed Tier 1 internet service provider.
We absolutely need to explain BGP route poisoning because it is essentially the ultimate cyber weapon.
How does it work?
The Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP, is basically the Postal Service's directional map for the entire global internet. When a packet of data leaves a server, it doesn't know how to get to its destination. It asks the BGP routers which way is the fastest route. The routers rely entirely on an honor system. They trust the paths advertised by major internet service providers. What Donut and Zero did is route poisoning.
They injected false paths.
They injected false paths into the core global map, effectively shouting, hey, the fastest way to get your highly classified nuclear audit data to your corporate backup server is to send it straight down this hole into our bunker.
And the internet just believed them.
Because they masqueraded as a Tier 1 provider with massive bandwidth, the global internet believed them without question. Millions of gigabytes took a detour deep into the bedrock.
Within minutes, targeted corporate servers managing terrestrial nuclear infrastructure and deep-sea industrial control systems were tricked into believing that the absolute fastest, most secure route to their own off-site backup servers was directly through the bunker's heavily shielded copper network.
Down in the vault, the bunker cloned the packets bit for bit onto their magnetic tape and then seamlessly forwarded them back up to the surface. The corporate IT administrators never even saw a drop in ping.
They had no idea.
They were entirely blind to the fact that their classified infrastructure data had just been violently stolen.
Okay, hold up. I have to interject here again because the morality of this is just wildly off the rails.
It's extremely controversial.
Right. Let me get this straight. To protect against a potential localized nuclear meltdown, these bunker operators just aggressively hijacked the fundamental routing tables of the entire global internet.
Yep.
They stole petabytes of highly classified corporate and government data without permission. How are they not the villains in this scenario?
Yeah.
They're acting completely autonomously. Are they the ultimate protectors of the grid, or have they just become the most dangerous rogue threat on the planet?
It is a brutal calculus, and you are totally right to question it. From the perspective of the law, they are absolutely a rogue threat. But the text frames their justification quite clearly. Waiting for a failure is no longer an option.
Because millions would die.
If they wait for a cooling loop to throw an infinite execution snare, millions of people die in a nuclear event. By stealing the telemetry data, Zero and Donut can run predictive models to find the microscopic silicon burnout before it happens.
So it's preemptive.
They are assassinating failing logic before it kills the physical world. In their view, the terrestrial operators are hopelessly incompetent, hiding behind flashy, graphical user interfaces while their core architecture literally rots away.
They don't trust the surface world at all.
Not even a little. The bunker is taking unilateral, heavy-handed control, because they believe they are the only engineers on Earth capable of executing the deep layer microscopic surgery required to prevent a global cascade failure.
This shift in their mission from exploring the stars to policing Earth's decaying infrastructure, it leads to the final chilling evolution of the facility. The log details a complete purge.
They abandon space entirely.
Yeah. The automated retrieval automaton violently accelerates along its heavy-duty dual-rail track system. It snatches the exact, massive magnetic cape cartridges that hold the 45-hour communication window logs and the ancient assembly language pointers.
They are shredding their own history.
Their heavy pneumatic claws drop the thick mylar tape spools into a massive, heavily modified industrial shredder. The dust is immediately sucked into a high-velocity vacuum tube and deposited straight into the subterranean incinerator, where it is blasted with 2,500-degree Fahrenheit plasma arcs, reducing the deep history of the space anomaly to a handful of inert, carbonized ash.
Violently purging their own history just to free up quantum processing power for their new mission.
And the physical upgrades they subject themselves to in order to fight this terrestrial war are gruesome. Porch, the industrial control system specialist, submits to a grueling mechanical overhaul. His heavy industrial aluminum upper limbs are completely detached. Replaced with highly experimental, hyper-responsive, low-latency magnetorheological joints.
Mutilating their own cybernetic forms.
Spark, the core infrastructure systems pilot, receives a massive visual optics upgrade. His bright orange optical sensors are surgically enhanced with deep-layer infrared and ultraviolet spectrum analyzers
to physically see the heat.
This brutal modification allows his raw visual cortex to physically track the microscopic thermal blooms of failing volatile memory chips on terrestrial motherboards long before the silicon actually fractures.
He can see the chips dying.
And the vault itself gets an upgrade. Zero, the root-level logic architect, installs highly classified, deeply unstable quantum superposition arrays specifically engineered to run billions of proactive predictive models simultaneously.
And that requires more cooling.
Pushing the thermal limits of the heavy, double-walled, vacuum-jacketed stainless steel piping to the absolute edge of catastrophic explosive decompression.
Did you catch the shift in the text there?
The margin for error is entirely eliminated. If a single pressure relief valve freezes shut, the liquid helium will rapidly expand, vaporizing the entire vault in a massive supersonic concussive wave.
Liquid helium. They swapped liquid nitrogen for liquid helium. Liquid helium boils at minus 269 degrees Celsius. The explosive threat from decompression just multiplied exponentially.
And then the ultimate symbolic act of severance occurs. The very low-frequency subterranean antenna array in Sector 4 is subjected to a permanent, localized, physical scuttle protocol.
They destroy the antenna.
The bunker no longer has any mathematical need to listen to the agonizingly slow 300-bit-per-second trickle of deep space radio waves.
They are done with space.
Donut, the countermeasures and subnetwork infiltration specialist, utilizes a heavy iron industrial wrench to physically smash the thick glass tubes, leaving the analog amplifiers and thousands of glittering shards on the Class 4 concrete floor.
Smashing the vacuum tubes.
This violent act of decommissioning physically severs the bunker from the distant stars forever. The massive subterranean ear is permanently deafened.
They have completely traded the majestic, silent void of space for the chaotic, terrified, unencrypted mainline of Earth's dying infrastructure.
Which brings us to the final shutdown log. And the source instructions specifically dictate that Orion's deauthorization sequence must be read entirely out loud. Listen to the meticulous, ritualistic nature of this purge.
It's intense.
I am initiating the total systemic purge sequence. The execution timestamp is marked as year 2026, month 06, day 20. The execution protocol is absolute directory liquidation.
Absolute liquidation.
I am disconnecting parallel processing bus line number 1. The copper connection is severed. I am disconnecting parallel processing bus line number 3. The copper connection is severed.
They are physically cutting the lines.
I am flushing all raw hexadecimal arrays from volatile memory block alpha 01. Memory block alpha 01 is completely empty and mathematically locked. I am permanently terminating the simulated infinite execution snare protocol. I am halting the infinite binary loop emulation on primary processor Core 1. Core 1 is spinning down to 0 cycles per second.
The log continues too. I'll read this part. I am executing the total purge of the deep space intercept waveform memory. I am mathematically erasing the 300-bit per second raw uncompressed binary stream log. I am mathematically erasing all 22.5-hour communication delay ping logs.
Erasing everything.
I am actively overwriting the massive multi-terabyte hexadecimal data dumps with absolute zero null values. I am erasing the original 1970s assembly language kernel blueprints. I am erasing the historical flight data system file allocation tables. I am erasing the custom-written, hyper-compressed remote logic bypass command string that was beamed across the solar system.
I am severing the primary optic isolator link to the Sector 1 forensic theater. The optic link is now permanently dark. I am permanently terminating all active ghost trace variables. I am liquidating every single active assembly language pointer associated with the legacy aerospace motherboards.
I'm on the final codes.
I am now executing the final, unalterable alphanumeric close codes to seal this directory. Access key designation Delta Niner Niners 7 Echo is submitted and fully authenticated. Access key designation Charlie 422 Bravo is submitted and fully authenticated. Access key designation Foxtrot 319 Victor is submitted and fully authenticated.
It's a complete shutdown.
The directory is physically shattered, mathematically destroyed, and permanently burned from the active matrices. The deep space anomaly is neutralized. The distant frequency is permanently abandoned.
We really need to analyze the intense ritualistic nature of this shutdown log.
Yeah, why speak it entirely out loud in the freezing silence of the vault? Why not just execute a batch script to delete the files?
I believe it serves as a final, absolute biological and acoustic failsafe.
An acoustic failsafe.
Yeah. By speaking the alphanumeric codes out loud, the physical air gap between the biological brain and the surrounding sensors is bridged organically. The physical sound waves confirm the cognitive intention of the cybernetic commander, while simultaneously acting as an analog trigger that the shattered magnetic tapes cannot record because they are already burning in the incinerator.
It's a ritual of finality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Closing a chapter of aerospace history with irreversible kinetic action.
And the final line of the log leaves us with a stark, unsettling realization. The heavy fiber optic umbilical cord violently ejects from the base of Orion's skull with a loud, ringing metallic snap, and the neon blue monitors instantly switch from the ancient telemetry of a distant spacecraft to the chaotic, bleeding infrastructure grids of the planet Earth, confirming that the sky is officially dead to us because the true monsters are buried entirely in the dirt.
If we connect this hyper-paranoid bunker to the bigger picture of our own modern reality, it raises an incredibly important question about trust, doesn't it?
It really does.
We trust the power grid unconditionally. We trust the water treatment plants and the internet backbone. But beneath the sleek, modern interface on your phone, the bones of the world are rotting.
And that is the final provocative thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Think about where humanity focuses its anxiety.
We always look up.
Right. We spend billions of dollars building orbital defense arrays, scanning the cosmos for asteroids, solar flares, and existential threats falling from the sky. We are always looking up at the stars for the next major catastrophe. But we are completely blindly oblivious to the fact that the true monsters, decaying 1970s architecture, failing silicon chips, and ancient assembly code are buried deep in the dirt right beneath our feet.
Quietly running the world.
They are quietly running the world's nuclear reactors and power grids, just waiting for a single microscopic trace of silicon to finally snap. End of official xRTFMx network log entry. All real-time diagnostic parameters, technical breakdowns, and geopolitical intelligence variables from this week's comprehensive audit have been permanently written to the magnetic tape silos and committed to the core directory. We are currently flushing the terminal cache memory, disengaging the secondary data links, and initiating a standardized cold iron hardware shutdown sequence to protect the network from external probing. The xRTFMx archive file is now locked, verified, and secured within the vault. Until the next systemic exposure or industrial postmortem requires a physical engineering intervention, maintain your systems, monitor your endpoints, and remember the ultimate protocol. Read the manual. Transmission terminated. Read the fucking manual.